de Mayo is a Mexican-American holiday that celebrates the Mexican victory over the French. So we joined Gabriela of Gabriela's Kitchen, her boyfriend Alex, and her brother Michael to have a tamalada, or a tamale-making party, to celebrate Cinco de Mayo.
This week on Working Class Foodies.
My name is Gabriela. I'm originally from New Mexico and I moved to New York 2 years ago. When we moved here, I started my blog, Gabriela's Kitchen. It's all about Mexican home cooking and kind of Latin twists on traditional cooking. I grew up in the kitchen with my mother and my grandmother and my godmother. Growing up, we used to go to my grandmother's house and make tamales together as a family. It's called a tamalada, which is like tamale making party. And it's kind of nice to keep the tradition going. The day before you assemble tamales, you usually boil the pork with oregano, onion, garlic, and salt. Just cook it on low heat, slow and low, for about 2.5 hours. The night before, I soaked the beans in hot water for about 8 hours, and then this morning, I turned on the heat and added 4 cloves of garlic and some oregano. But you can use canned beans too, they'll be fine. Just rinse them before you use them. The day of, the first thing you should do is soak the dried chili pods. We used about 30 of them in hot water, and we rinsed them 3 times to get any dust off of them. At the same time, we were soaking the corn husks so that they could be soft and malleable. Once a chili is soaked for about 30 minutes, you break off the stem and then you tear them lengthwise and strip out any seeds. You can use the water that's still in the bowl to help you get the seeds off, and then you place the membranes of the chili into the blender. And once your blender is filled with all of the chili, you add about 4 or 5 cloves of garlic, about ½ a tablespoon of oregano, and about ½ a tablespoon of salt. And then you can add ½ a cup of broth to the blender, and you blend it on high speed in your blender for about 3 to 5 minutes till it's not thin, but it's not pasty. It should kind of stick to your spoon but slide off at the same time. And then you can put it in a skillet with a little bit of vegetable or olive oil on medium heat for about 10 minutes just to let all the flavors meld together. Pork that we've cooked the night before, we warmed it up in the broth so that it would be easier to shred, and we just used our hands and forks and knives and cut off all the fat, shredded it up into pieces. It was about 2 cups of pork, and we poured about 1.5 cups of red chili sauce over it and mixed it together and added some extra salt. Part of my mission in cooking is to make sure that all my friends get to enjoy my food, and so I kind of created a vegan version of the tamales. And to fill them, I used ingredients that are typical of New Mexico, which is corn, squash, and beans, and chili. Chili is also. Those are kind of like the 4 staples of New Mexican cooking. So we chopped the squash so that the squash were the same size as the kernels of corn and the size of the black beans, which we'll be mixing them all together. Once they were all chopped, we put them in a bowl. So we'll pour those veggies in here to saute them. They'll cook more once they're in the tamales, but we don't want them to be crunchy once they're done. And added about 1 cup of each vegetable. I'm really thankful for my vegetarian and vegan friends because they make me be more creative. And added about 1 cup of red chili and stirred that together, and that will be the filling for the vegan tamales. The ratio of the masa is 4 to 1, so 4 cups of dry masa and then 1 cup of lard. So instead of pork lard, you use vegetable shortening. So what you do first is you whip the lard with a fork, or the shortening if you're making the vegetarian tamales, so that it's fluffy. And then about 1/2 cup at a time you add the masa until it's fully incorporated. And then for each batch, you will add either the vegetable broth or the pork broth that we've reserved from the pork cooking night before. It should be like a sticky paste that's spreadable when you put them in the corn husks. You take your corn husks and you grab some masa and you spread it about 1/8 of an inch thick, leaving about 1 inch to 1.5 inches at the bottom of each corn husk because you'll be folding that over. And you spread it all the way to the top and make sure it's right in the middle of the husk. After the masa is spread evenly, you take the filling and you line it straight down the middle going vertically. And then you fold over your masa, sort of like a taco, and then you fold the bottom end up to close it, and then you can lay it down and let the weight of the tamale hold it shut. If you have a steamer, you just fill it up with water on the bottom in order to protect the tamales from getting wet. We laid some of the smaller corn husks that would be discarded along the bottom of the pan so that they'd protect them while steaming. Line your tamales up as you stand them up vertically, so they're all kind of like a spiral of little soldiers in the pot, just leaning against each other, and they're nice and snug so that they don't fall over it. We fit about 30 tamales into our pot. We're gonna cook our tamales for about an hour and a half to 2 hours, and you can test them and you know they're done when the corn husk peels very easily away from the masa. You can eat a tamale by itself if you just want to pack it in your lunch or like put it in your bag if you're going somewhere to eat on the go. But they're also really great if you have any extra of the chili sauce. If you just heat them up and put a little chili sauce over the top and some beans. Or they're also really great for breakfast with a fried egg on top. So I made 2 aguas frescas. It's a traditional kind of Mexican street food drink. And one flavor I made was a traditional horchata, and the other was cucumber, honeydew, and mint flavored with lemon. Tamales are traditional throughout Mexico. The ones we made were wrapped in corn husks, which is traditional of like northern Mexico. Traditional New Mexican tamales are just filled with pork and red chili.
With the traditional pork and the vegan tamales combined, we made 30 tamales. All came down to $30. Bucket tamale, can't really beat that. Right now, rhubarb is in season, and today at the Brooklyn Flea, I had a fantastic popsicle from People's Pops that was rhubarb, sour cherry, and ginger. So if you've got a great rhubarb recipe that's not a strawberry rhubarb pie, let us know. If we like it, we might share it on our blog, so check back. And we'll see you next week on Working Class Foodies.